Hey guys, welcome back. We're glad that you're still on our blog. And now in this vlog, we are going to talk about fate and how it applies to these two novels, the things they carried, and A Lesson Before Dying.
And the things they carried. It's a novel about the main character, Tim, who goes off to war in Vietnam and his struggles with being drafted and the war in general. And it shows the struggles of other young men who are in the war.
Yeah, he's the author of the book, and so he's talking about like his experience and then his fellow.
It's not technically an autobiography, but
it's fine.
We kind of think of it like one.
I guess. Okay, so I guess the first thing we can talk about with fate, when author Tim O'Brien got drafted to the Vietnam War, he had a lot of internal struggle with the fact that he got drafted and if he wanted to go to the war or not. He kind of ran away to the Rainy River where he met this old man who ran like a lodge cabin.
yeah.
Bed and breakfast.
But like not
Airbnb.
fancy. But he stayed with this guy for a while and he kind of did work for him, did chores for him. But this is where he really, I guess, went through all the points or thoughts he had about going to the war, and he was wrestling with his inner conscience about going or not going. He kept asking himself if he was a coward to go to the war when that's not what he believed in, or if he was a coward to run away to Canada and not go to the war.
Yeah, and I think this chapter definitely showed Tim's struggle with his own fate because he was a smart kid. He was going to go to Harvard, and he just thought that him being drafted to the war was unfair because he had a picture of his life planned out where he was like a successful, whatever he wanted to do, smart person. And,
He didn't want the war to ruin that.
Yeah, he thought the war was like not his fate.
So in this chapter, he really tested his fate, and he tried to change it. So that's kind of one of the questions we've been asking throughout our whole blog is like, can you change your fate? Do you play a role in deciding it?
So ultimately, though, you find out at the end of the chapter that, and the rest of the book, that he decides to go to war. And so whether or not that was his fate, he saw that as what he had to do, and he went to it. He didn't want to be known as a coward who ran away. He faced his fear head on.
Mm-hmm. So, did fate win in this instance then? Can you really change your fate if he was still drafted and he still went? Fate kind of won, I guess.
Yeah, I think us three agree on that, whether or not you guys, that's your own opinions.
Yeah, and throughout the novel, it shows like the fate of other soldiers and how fate is unfair. For example, Kiowa was a good person, and he went to church, and he died a stupid death. So I think that shows that fate isn't always representative of the life you live.
Or the life you deserve, or what you deserve as a person.
Sometimes fate can screw you over.
Mm-hmm. It kind of is like karma, too. Like,
yeah,
they
it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
And like whether you believe in fate or karma, or if you believe in both, you never really know like what's going to happen with either of them. Like you could be a good person and you could do all the right things and you could be there for everyone, and then you could die a stupid death, or you could be the complete opposite and just be a terrible person and get through everything and live till you're super old.
Yeah. Another role that fate plays in this novel is that it really messes up a lot of the guys that will go to the war. It makes them do uncharacteristic things, or it turns them into kind of like a totally different person. One example is Lieutenant Jimmy Cross. He became really distracted and distraught throughout the war by looking at pictures of his girlfriend from back home, who wasn't really his girlfriend, but he was in love with her, but like she never...
Relatable.
Yeah.
Shoot. Dang it. We know you're out there.
And shoot. And this totally led him like this caused death of his men in the war. So his fate of going to the war really screwed with him and caused a lot of terrible things to happen.
And also, like, fate makes you do, like, uncharacteristic things you wouldn't do back home. Like, in the war, the men saw, what was it, like
A
baby
cow,
buffalo.
a baby buffalo.
And they just kind of annihilated it and shot it. And because they knew their fate in the war and they knew probably what was going to happen to them, they did some things that were kind of out of the ordinary for them.
Yeah, for sure.
So that just, all those things kind of answer the question, like, what can fate do to a person? And those are a lot of things. It can make them go kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It can cause loss of lives. In this instance, like PTSD, which a lot of the soldiers struggled with after the war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big theme of this novel, too, is how their fate of being sent to Vietnam changed their lives completely, and how all the soldiers have to deal with that. And the majority of them didn't come out the same way they came in.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next novel is A Lesson Before Dying, which they kind of like mentioned fate even like straight on in the they talked about this novel, you want to explain it a little bit? Okay.
So in A Lesson Before Dying, there's two men, and one of them is sitting on death row awaiting
His name is Jefferson.
His name is Jefferson, and he got convicted of murder, and so he is sitting on death row waiting for his execution date.
But he wasn't really guilty.
Yeah.
He was just like wrong place, wrong time.
Yes.
Blacked.
And like, and that's, we'll get into that more because that's like his fate. Like he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and he couldn't change that. But anyways, and then there's another guy, Grant, and he is given this task of helping Jefferson deal with dying.
Because he's educated.
Yep.
He went to school. He's a teacher. And being educated and being black in this town isn't necessarily, like, common.
Yeah. So, Jefferson's godmother gave Grant this task to help Jefferson become a man. That's what she wanted for her godson before he died.
We should mention this is also in the civil rights era.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So there was a lot about whether or not black men should be able to stand up for themselves, and teaching a black man, like Grant being an educated person, teaching an uneducated person. There's lessons dealing with that too, and how you can change someone.
Yeah. So as they talked how they mentioned fate, like head on in the novel, Grant is talking about how a black man's fate in this town right when he's born is to change the vicious circle, which is for the past 300 years, like black men are born and they work for white people and they don't really have much of a purpose or any power or...
Yeah, and they're treated lesser than white men, so especially for Jefferson, they wanted to break this cycle, I suppose, because he was convicted, if you can say that, of murder, even though, like, we know kind of the truth of what happened, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, yeah.
And so their fate as, well, especially for Grant being a black man who's educated, the responsibility was placed upon him to change the vicious circle and to end the discrimination between blacks and whites here. So as that responsibility was placed upon him, and he kind of struggled with the fact, for sure, that he had so much responsibility and that he was educated and that he had to do all these things.
And just like Tim O'Brien, he had that internal struggle about whether or not he was going to leave.
Mm-hmm. So some people... What happened?
It's like paused.
But it's still going. Let's just keep talking.
We can make